60 Minutes Rewind.
The Washington cast of Ken Starr's investigation of President Clinton shows up on stage so often, many never want to hear the names Monica Lewinsky and Linda Tripp again. But in Little Rock, in his other grand jury that will likely be dismissed this week, the independent counsel's been targeting people you've probably never heard of. He did get some pretty big fish, former Governor Jim Guy Tucker and former Associate Attorney General Webb Hubbell. But in his effort to net the biggest fish of all, the President and the First Lady, the independent counsel went after some very small fish indeed. And he used some pretty tough tactics, and among others, a woman named Sarah Hawkins. Sarah Hawkins' run-in with the independent counsel began when federal agents handed her a letter from Starr's office saying she was the subject of a criminal investigation and that there was, quote, substantial evidence against her.
My first reaction was I thought it was a joke. I even told them 2 FBI agents delivered the letter, and I thought, you guys are kidding.
Sarah Hawkins was accused of being part of a scheme to illegally backdate loan appraisals more than a decade ago when she worked as an officer of the now-defunct Madison Savings and Loan, the bank owned by Jim McDougal, Bill and Hillary Clinton's partner in the failed Whitewater land deal. Hawkins' accuser was a co-worker who had already made a plea bargain with Starr's office. Adamant that she was innocent, she met with Starr and his deputies, who she says threatened that if she didn't cooperate, name some names, accept a plea bargain, and admit to a felony, they would really throw the book at her.
They even, at one point, he said that if you don't plead to the felony, we could bring charges to you for all 80 counts, which would mean 400 years. They told me that, you've got kids. You don't want them to have to go through a jury trial. You don't want them to have to go through this.
Ms. Hawkins says Starr's office was relentless in what she believes was an effort to get her to make a deal to rat on Jim McDougal, who in turn would be squeezed to help nail the president. If that was the tactic, it didn't work. Sarah Hawkins said, no deal.
You cannot force a person to admit to something that's not true. And that's exactly what they were trying to do in my case. This is 62, 63, 64, 65.
Today she works part-time in a credit union. But when Starr went after her in 1994, she owned her own business, working as a loan consultant in the banking industry. But once word got out that she'd been targeted by the independent counsel,
my work dried up. My income, all of a sudden I couldn't make any income anymore. I didn't know what was going on.
Did anyone ever say to you that look, they can't give you any work, they can't give you any business because of the Madison Bank affair?
Yes.
The Wall Street Journal had included her name as one of those under Ken Starr's microscope.
So I guess everybody was reading the newspapers and nobody would call me, nobody would hire me.
Hawkins, the sole support of her 2 daughters and 2 granddaughters, says her income fell from about $100,000 a year to less than $25,000. Her oldest daughter had to leave college. They went on food stamps.
I got so depressed. It was just rough. I mean, I can remember one year where I couldn't even afford school clothes for my kids. Now, I'd always been able to provide for my children.
I see your point. It's just the
Hawkins' lawyer, Rick Holliman, says Starr's office kept the pressure on for 6 months with threats of a laundry list of indictments. He finally told them, go ahead, indict.
I said, read my lips. She's not going to plead guilty to anything. And if you're going to indict her, you keep saying you're going to do it, she needs to get this on. So do it.
But they still didn't.
How's my girl doing?
The threats continued. Hawkins says it was her church that saved her emotionally.
They came after her, but then God stepped in. And then they had to bag up and leave her alone.
After a full year of threats and fear, Sarah Hawkins was finally off the hook. A letter from Ken Starr admitting he did not have sufficient evidence to support even one indictment. What was your reaction to that?
Oh, I was overjoyed, of course. I said, this is finally over. I stood up, held my ground, and now this is all over.
And was that the end of it?
Oh, no. and the plot thickened.
A month later, the heat was back on. One of Starr's lawyers said,
Since this person would not cooperate with us, we wondered what she had to hide. And so we started doing some more digging. And we've come up with new activity that we think may have involved her in criminal activity, but I'm not going to tell you what it is.
how would you describe overall this whole process?
The process was extremely abusive to her. This whole idea of now we're going to investigate you on something else since you wouldn't cooperate with us. I find that, to me, personally, that defines Big Brother.
She still refused to talk to them. That was more than 2 years ago. They never did follow up on their second threat. No charges were ever brought against her. Sarah Hawkins is now confident none ever will be.
Fortunately for me, I didn't have much left but my integrity and my family and my kids. And the only thing I could do was uphold that.
You had nothing to lose.
I had nothing to lose.
Except your good name.
Except my good name, which was good for me, but bad for Starr.
Ken Starr won't talk to us, but he does have his defenders. Henry Hudson was a U.S. attorney when Ken Starr was Solicitor General in the Bush administration. Hudson says in the Hawkins case, Ken Starr was doing what all good prosecutors do.
I don't know exactly what information Ken Starr had when he sat down to talk to her. I have to assume, knowing Ken Starr as I do, that he had some information which either led him or his investigators to believe there was a prosecutable case there. I think in good faith he told her that if she didn't cooperate, she would be prosecuted. Certainly that tactic is used every day.
But in this case, we're not talking about taking some petty criminal, say, in order to get the leader of a major drug ring. You're talking about people with no criminal record and apparently, in Sarah Hawkins' case, barely a suspicion of any wrongdoing.
Well, Sarah Hawkins is an extreme case, I have to admit. But in the average situation, when you're investigating white-collar crime within the banking industry, frequently the lesser figures don't have any prior criminal involvement whatsoever, but yet they're caught up in the vortex of a major fraud. And the only way you're going to get the people at the top, those people at the very apex, is to prosecute the underlings and have them testify against the people that play a much greater role.
Many believe that's exactly why two Arkansas bankers, Herbie Branscombe and Rob Hill, were prosecuted. Starr accused them of illegally taking $13,000 from their bank and giving it to Clinton's 1990 campaign for governor, and of not reporting cash withdrawals by the campaign. Starr wanted to make a deal to get them to cooperate. Hill and Branscombe said no, they were innocent and they'd take their chances in court.
We feel very confident that when we bring out the truth, we'll be acquitted.
They were acquitted on 4 counts against them. The jury was deadlocked on 7 others. There were no convictions. Neither will talk about their bitter experience, but Branscombe's lawyer, Dan Guthrie, says Starr's tactics were crude and abusive.
Rob's 16-year-old son, 16 years old, they sent federal agents, as I understand it, out to the school, and they tried to serve a 16-year-old kid with a federal grand jury subpoena.
When agents working for Starr showed up at Perryville High to serve Robert Hill Jr., after not finding him at home, School Superintendent Ernest Huff refused to let them in.
I said, we're not going to allow, any subpoena to be served on a student in front of other students.
I don't like the idea of a 16-year-old receiving a subpoena in school. But Morley, that's the way investigations are conducted, and some prosecutors do that. It's not just something Ken Starr has done.
Is the point of that kind of hardball to scare the wits out of the witness?
Sure it is. It's designed to get their attention and hope that you can encourage them to be cooperative and let them know that this is not a game, that this is very serious business.
And very expensive business. To fight Starr's charges and clear their names, Rob Hill and Herbie Branscombe spent more than $500,000.
The story will continue after this.
You say it cost them about $600,000, more or less. to defend themselves. How much did the government spend trying them?
Millions.
On top of that, Guthrie says, Starr had a legion of lawyers and agents.
So we were literally fighting an entire army. Now, not all those agents were working on this case, but that's the kind of resources they had at their disposal.
Steve Smith felt the heat of that firepower.
Okay, we're going to be working on the ACA webpage.
He's a professor at the University of Arkansas, a former president of an Arkansas bank, and business partner of Jim McDougal's. And 20 years ago, he was an aide to then Governor Bill Clinton. He levels an even more serious charge at Starr's operation.
They asked me to lie about other people, and they've lied about what they've done.
In 1995, Smith pleaded guilty to a misdemeanor for misusing a loan, borrowing $65,000 for one thing, then using the money for something else. Smith's plea bargain included an agreement to testify against others to the grand jury.
Dr. Smith has pledged his cooperation to this investigation, and that cooperation has already begun.
Did Starr's office make it clear what they wanted you to say to the grand jury?
Oh, they made it very clear, yeah. They had a typed up script that purported to be my testimony that they wanted me to go in and read to the grand jury. And in that were things that they were asking me to say that were untrue. Things that I had repeatedly told them were not true, things that I told them I had no knowledge about. Yet there it was typed up as my testimony.
In the end, did you read from the script?
I told them it was false, and I wouldn't read it to the grand jury, and they took it out.
Starr's office has denied it gave Smith a script. Smith insists it did.
I'll take a lie detector test if Ken Starr will, and we'll see who's telling the truth about this. They're not interested in the truth. They're interested in getting something on the president.
I know Ken Starr well enough to know that he's a reasonable, objective person. This is a tough investigation. He's charging hard. The public's eye is on him. But I don't think he has abandoned his objectivity here, and I don't think he's being partisan about this. A good part of the population of Little Rock believes otherwise. They point to the hundreds of subpoenas Starr's office issued and the number of people they believe were threatened the way Sarah Hawkins and Steve Smith were. But Hawkins and Smith went public with their ordeal. Most others say they are too frightened of Starr to even talk about him.
The independent counsel has become the nuclear missile of political warfare. He has no boss. He has no tenure limitation. He can go on as long as he wants to. He has no budget limitation. He can spend as much money as he wants to. So you have literally set up, with the independent counsel, you have set up what is tantamount to a fourth branch of government. And he has authority to do things that make it a very frightening amount of power to concentrate in one man.
That concerns even a Starr defender like Henry Hudson.
There is a serious problem, I believe, with the independent counsel law as it stands today. The idea of someone having this type of prosecutorial discretion without any oversight by an appointed or elected official is very, very troublesome. But on the other hand, Morley, if the person were accountable to an appointed or elected official, would they be independent?
Those are among the questions the Congress will consider when the independent counsel law comes up for renewal a year from now.